Time for a spiritual awakening. Time for a spiritual awakening.
Today I'm going to be reading a small article from the Science of Mind magazine for July 2021, and it's entitled Born of Vision. It begins, "Our world is calling us into a new way of being, so we recognize the deep connection among us all and learn to live together as a global community. The message of the universe is conspiring to teach us of and about metaphysical needs, our soul needs." Well, I love this introductory paragraph. The world is calling us to live in a new and metaphysical way. That means that there's a higher level in our minds that we can ascend to and that we can focus on. The lower levels of our mind, of course, get us through the day on a practical level. But there's also a practical metaphysical purpose behind the practical everyday purpose, and that would be the infinite metaphysical purpose of loving each other, recognizing the oneness, the interbeing, the interconnectedness that exists with all of us. I think that there's nothing more important than knowing my purpose is to uncover that awareness within myself. My mind is one with the God of my understanding, love. My mind is one with my brothers and sisters and the world. This is the truth. It sets me free. I know that this is true because I'm heightened in my sense of peace and harmony. All that I know is given to me by God. God sends the message metaphysically through my soul, through my mind, through my consciousness, and all of it then can be further transmitted in my speech and actions to my brothers and sisters, and then again back to me. Because the more I give out, the more I receive. The more I understand, the more I'm at peace. There is a plan. The plan is that we give from our hearts. The plan is that we understand from our hearts. The plan is that we be loving to others who are really mirror images of who we are. That's the truth. There's no division. There's no separation. God and I are one. I and my neighbor are one. I recognize God. I recognize myself. I recognize my neighbor. This Trinity, if you will, corresponds with the Holy Trinity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That is the truth. But let's go on a little bit in this reading. It says the message of the universe is conspiring to teach us of our metaphysical needs, our soul needs. Just as each one of us needs to place, just as we each need to play a place to belong, a place to be loved and seen, a way to deeply express ourselves, we must now recognize there is a similar and overlapping set of needs at the soul level. Our souls need to be seen and heard in a way that only other souls can do. Our minds need an outward place to belong, but our souls need an inward place to belong. Well, we each need a place to belong, but that's a given. We already belong. Don't resist it. Just open up your mind in the quiet of your prayer and meditation and understand that you already are a belonging soul. There's nothing of you that's an outsider. As a belonging soul, you then have access and are privy to the messages of God. God speaks to each soul and all souls in the same way. The message is always filled with light. The message is always filled with love. Yes, when we receive the message, we individualize it to our own particulars in our lives. That's the level at which our consciousness comprehends it. But the message itself is the same. It's a holistic message that is only then individualized at my level of consciousness upon receipt. But it is not a different message, and it doesn't come from a different God. There's one God, there's one message, there's one solution that I can then particularize with my infinite intelligence that I gain from being a holy child of God. So let's take an example. Let's say I'm having difficulty with money. There's a lack of money. Maybe I've lost a job. Maybe my expenses and my spending are out of hand. What I need to do, first and foremost, is to stop, listen, and obey. Stop, listen, and obey. You notice there's no judgment in that. There's only stopping, sitting in the silence, listening with my heart to my higher power, which I call God, the infinite solution, and then apply that in my life as God's directing and guiding me. Well, I then take the message of being of love and light, which gives me all of the power of the universe, and I concretize it. I make it simple from a consciousness point of view, pragmatic as to what I need to do. And the answers keep coming. And I focus on that, and I keep attracting. And I keep putting it out there as a thought. I will be restored to abundance and prosperity. I will accomplish my purpose in a job. I will accumulate enough money so that my bills get paid. I'm willing. I follow the lead of my higher power, which I call God, over and over. I've stopped, I've listened, I've obeyed, I've particularized it, I've concretized it, I've visioned it, I've seen it in my mind, I've seen it in the outside circumstances as they change, consistent with my thinking. Remember, as one thinks, so is it done unto them. So these are universal laws, and the law is particularized from the general infinite solution of God itself. Light, love, obeying, willingness, understanding, acceptance, discovering, peacefulness, serenity. All of that comes in a practice of sitting, listening in the silence, being willing to love one another, see the interbeingness and interconnectedness that exists. I can't be a soul that's different from other souls. At the soul level, we are all loving and filled with light and prosperous. There's nothing I need do except integrate that into my mind and my speech and my actions. Maybe I'll spend less. Maybe I'll attract more money. Maybe I'll understand that some of my so-called necessities really are useless and I can let them go. They've been a drain, a money drain in my life. Well, that's just one example. Let's go on in our reading, but remember, we sit and listen in the silence. We're willing, we obey, we follow. We sit in the comfort of our home in God, in God's mind. God promotes well-being. God promotes happiness. God understands each and every one of us, will then take the message and use it in our particular circumstances. Not at the effect of the circumstances, but as in the cause and responsibility of those things that I find myself challenged by, and then solving them with God's help. That's the only way that the message works. That's the only way that the universe works. That's the only way that the cosmos works. That's the only way that souls ascend, by virtue of their listening, obeying, and acting consistent with the message of God. Well, similarly, our souls need a place to mirror and amplify the expression of others. One of our soul's deepest desires is to be sympathetically vibrating with other souls, to connect with other souls who are equally dedicated to pursuing the evolution of the human and spiritual consciousness. Our souls yearn for a deep connection with a community of people doing good in the world. So I want to affiliate in my mind and join with people who are similarly motivated, to recognize the interconnectedness, to recognize the soulfulness of each of us as identical, so that we don't see people as in any way separate and strange to us or unworthy and undeserving. We see them with the vision of God. Our God vision opens up to us the whole panoply of the universe as holistic and as one, circulating, vibrating with a oneness, pulsating, extending, expressing light and love. Join with that. Your mind is part of it. You are part of it as a soul. The body, yes, has individuated paths. The body may have limitations, but it can still be a purveyor of the eternal message of the souls that are eternal expressions of God's love and light and intelligence. All of this is within our purview if we stop, we listen, we obey, and we act consistent with God's guidance and pray for God's power to carry it out. This is the truth within us. And in this way, we seek our fellow man, our fellow spiritual beings, our fellow travelers. Be a light unto the nations, because they are a light unto us. And these many points of light then take away the darkness, shine away the darkness as the nothingness that it is. Because darkness is not of God. Light is of God. And only God's light is meaningful and real. Everything else is false. And I don't want to bow down to false idols. I refuse to bow down to that which is valueless and meaningless. I'm only interested in setting my sights on that which God has instilled within me and has programmed me to then function and purposefully identify in the world as who and what I and we are. And that's love, compassion, kindness, empathy, helpfulness, forgiveness, non-judgment. We're all sinless ultimately. We're all guiltless ultimately. We're all fearless ultimately, because we're of God nature. We're of God stuff. Not what we had made up by the ego that, trades in sin and guilt and fear. I put that aside. I do that through forgiving others that may have judged me or that I've judged as sinful and guilty. We're not. Put that aside. Lay it down. Put it on the altar in your mind for God to shine with light and love away, so that what comes through naturally is the love and light of God. This is the truth. And when you know that you are a holy child of God, created in her likeness and image, you will act accordingly. There's nothing strange about it. It's the most organic, the most natural way of expressing who we are. So again, let's remember our connection as souls. Let's be born of vision today, God's vision, not our limited, finite vision. We know what's true in our heart of hearts. when we sit in prayer, when we sit and we listen to God's voice speaking the truth. And when that truth is integrated by our speech and our actions, and the avoidance of anything to the contrary that would be unworthy of God's vision and speech and action, we're building for ourselves a soul life and a bodily, earthly life consistent with that which God intended. That's all we need be interested in. What has God created? What is God interested in? What would God have me do? What would God have me say, and to whom? Are my statements and my speech and actions kind? Are they loving? Do they build up other people, knowing that they and we have insecurities, but we can overcome the insecurities by the nature of our God-instilled wisdom? This is what we inherited. This is how we were raised as the children of God, as a nation of godlings. Be that. Know that you are empowered. You won't fail. You can't fail, because what God has placed within you is the infinite success of God itself. And when you open up to that, all the other mistakes that may have happened are forgotten. They're just dismissed as learning tools and experiences. I can learn from them, but I'm not going to carry them around on my back and in my mind as guilt-ridden. Why should I do that when God has expressed for me multiple, infinite possibilities on the horizon that I want to embrace? I want to share. I want to express. All of this is possible, but only when I join hands with God. It's a metaphor, but I can join hands with God. My hand on the right hand of God. I'm seated at the right hand of God. We all are. There's nothing special about me other than we're all very, very holy. And that means we're all special in each other's lives and in the world, and beyond this world to the world to come. All of this is wonderful. It uplifts the soul. It uplifts the mind. We're happy. We're celebratory. We dance. We sing. We express in our minds and our hearts that which God had placed within us. But it starts with being willing to stop, listen, obey, and then function consistent with our purpose as children of God. This is all that's necessary. People say, well, that sounds simple enough, but it's not easy. But I'm saying it's simple and it's easy. Why? Because we're getting out of the way and letting the corrective measures take their way, so that what naturally comes through is effortless. There's nothing easier than that. That's the way it is. Can you be the fulfillment of God's will? Of course, you already are. You may have placed some obscurations and blocks, and difficulties and unneeded and unnecessary challenges in front of your eyes. These scales need to be lifted so that we know and we see that we are unfettered, unblocked. We are the full-blown expression of God's mind in a world created by God's mind, to be a classroom in which we learn to love one another and to love our true selves. Knowing this, we know the truth, and it sets us free. Loving this, all the fear goes away. Who does it? God does it. Who experiences it? God's sons and daughters, you and me, our souls. And it frees our souls then to either come back for another earthly experience as better teachers, better mentors, better brothers and sisters, or it frees us up finally not to come back on an earthly plane. But God's house has many mansions, and we're free to travel to the other spheres of dimensions, the Sephirot, that are possible for us. This is the nature of the grand plan. We want to take full advantage of it, not in a selfish way, but in a way that is giving. The more I'm able to take advantage, the more I'm able to serve you, to serve my brothers and sisters. The more I take advantage of this, as God intended, the more in harmony I am with God, and I begin vibrating and resonating and energetically expressing and harmonizing in whatever circumstance I'm in, whatever dimension I occupy, in a way that's consistent with the God self. And that shines a light. That blesses everybody. Everybody then feels the holiness. Everybody then feels the peace that they've always been searching for. And you and I are the way and the light and the life, as is everybody else who becomes more and more expressive of self with a capital S. That's the way it was constructed to happen. And we want to be a good teacher of God. We want to be a good worker for God. We want to be a channeler for God's will and light. Can you channel it? Yes, most naturally, most simply and easily. It's the way your mind is constructed. There's nothing to fear. There's nothing to wonder if you're up for the task. Every one of the great prophets in the Bible had misgivings. And God said, I'll be with you to carry out this mission or purpose. Don't be afraid. I'm with you. And of course, they went on to accomplish that which God within them is accomplishing. There's only one thing that needs to be in some way accomplished, and there's only one way or method by which it will be accomplished. And that's to awaken to our spiritual nature through the power and through the love of God itself. It's simply that. And that shines away all the darkness, all the shadow life, all of the blocks to the awareness of love that is who and what we are. When we do this, when we know this, when we behave consistent with this, our lives are lives of purpose. Our awakening is one of a spiritual awakening. There's nothing else for you to do while you're here. Yes, you'll have a family to attend to, but you'll do it with God's grace. Yes, you'll have a job and you'll have bills to pay and you'll have a way to earn a living in the world, but you'll do it with God's grace, not with your own cleverness. Being clever, doing it without God's grace, or at least the consciousness of God's grace, puts you in a situation of misery. You're never happy with what you've accomplished. It's never enough to the ego, to the selfishness of the small self. The small self is selfish, and by its very nature is never grateful, is never satisfied, never has enough. Whereas the true self, the true soul, the neshama of God, is always satisfied as it's in process. It's filled with grace, it's filled with love, filled with gratitude, filled with awesomeness. It recognizes this is the way that God intended it. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I've tried to make it some other way for selfish reasons, to self-aggrandize, to know some kind of grandiosity at the expense of others. But now I found that there's a better way where we all are an expression of God's grandeur, not my own personal grandiosity. And when that occurs, and when I'm in the midst of it, I know true happiness and true peace. It's a glorious feeling of filled with grace, filled with God's love, filled with heaven. I'm restored to Gan Eden, to the Garden of Eden. I'm restored to everything that God bestowed upon me when she created the brotherhood of humanity. The very nature of God's children is one of happiness and bliss in the Garden of Eden. This is no mere story. Heaven is real. Heaven is a state of mind in which the reality of God is expressing fully and always, eternally, in the present moment of now. This is the moment of now, of eternity. The past has no reality. The future has no reality. It's only the present moment of the now. And in this moment of eternality of now, the soul is forever shining. The soul is forever expressing as an expression of God. Well, that's the message for today. I can't imagine anybody's situation, and of course, how could I, where that is an exception to God's provisions for us, God's grace for us, God's care and loving for us. You are cared for in this moment. There's nothing to be sad or depressed about. Don't take inward that which you see as negative circumstances. Change your thinking, and those outward circumstances will align with the light and the love of God, which is perfect happiness and bliss. Yours is the perfect way. Yours is the way of the connection of souls. Yours is born of vision. Be it, live it, not just in this lifetime, but forever and always. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing with us this episode. Thank you to the NECAT Network and to Candace Adelson for editing this experience and this video. We'll see you next time. Shalom, peace, namaste.